Camilla stood at the airport terminal, her hands shaking as she gripped her passport. The fluorescent lights above cast harsh shadows on her tired face. She had been planning this trip for months, saving every penny from her job at the local bakery. Her destination was Spain, where her sister Maria lived with her family. It had been 3 years since they last saw each other, and Camilla's heart ached with longing. The airport was busy that Tuesday morning. Families rushed past her with their children. Business people talked loudly on their phones, and tourists gathered around information boards. Camilla felt small among all these people. She wore her best dress, a simple blue one that her mother had given her before she passed away. In her worn leather purse, she carried her life savings, enough money to last her 2 weeks in Spain. At 28 years old, Camilla had never traveled outside her home country. She worked 6 days a week at the bakery, starting before sunrise to prepare fresh bread for the morning customers. Her boss, Mrs. Rodriguez, had finally agreed to give her time off after Camilla begged her for weeks. This vacation was more than just a trip. It was her chance to see the world beyond her small town. Camilla checked her watch nervously. Her flight was scheduled to leave in 2 hours. She pulled her small suitcase behind her, the wheels making a soft clicking sound on the polished floor. Inside the suitcase were her few good clothes, some gifts for her sister's children, and a photo album filled with pictures from their childhood. These memories were precious to her, especially since their parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago. As she approached the security checkpoint, Camilla noticed a tall guard in uniform watching her closely. Officer Martinez had been working at the airport for 15 years. His dark eyes missed nothing as he observed the crowds of travelers. Something about this young woman caught his attention. She seemed nervous, more nervous than most first-time flyers. Her clothes were simple, and her suitcase looked old and well-used. The guard had seen many people try to leave the country illegally over the years. Some were criminals running from the law. Others were people trying to escape debts they couldn't pay. His job was to protect the nation's borders and make sure everyone who left had the right to do so. Officer Martinez took his duties very seriously. Camilla joined the long line at security, her heart beating faster with each step forward. She had all the correct documents, her passport, visa, and flight ticket. Everything was legal and proper. She had worked with a travel agency for months to make sure all her paperwork was correct. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something might go wrong. Behind her in line, a businessman complained loudly about the wait. In front of her, an elderly couple spoke quietly about visiting their grandchildren. Camilla tried to calm herself by thinking about Maria. Her sister had sent her photos of the beautiful Spanish countryside, the olive groves, and the small apartment where she lived with her husband and 2 young sons. When it was finally Camilla's turn, she stepped forward and handed her documents to Officer Martinez. He looked at her passport photo, then at her face, then back at the photo again. His expression was serious and unreadable. Camilla managed a small, nervous smile, hoping to appear friendly and honest. The guard examined her visa carefully, holding it up to the light to check for any signs that it might be fake. He had been trained to spot false documents, and he knew all the tricks that people use to create illegal papers. After several long minutes, he looked up at Camilla with suspicion in his eyes. Something about her story didn't add up in his mind. A young woman traveling alone for the first time, with very little money and old luggage. In his experience, this combination often meant trouble. He decided he needed to investigate further before allowing her to board her flight to Spain. Officer Martinez cleared his throat and spoke in a stern voice. "Miss, I need you to step aside for additional screening." Camilla's face went pale. Her stomach dropped as she watched other passengers move through security without any problems. She didn't understand what was happening or why she was being singled out. "Is there something wrong with my documents?" Camilla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The guard didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured for her to follow him to a small office area away from the main security line. Other travelers stared at her as she walked past, pulling her suitcase behind her. She felt embarrassed and confused. The office was small and windowless, with white walls and a metal desk. There were 2 plastic chairs and a fluorescent light that buzzed softly overhead. Officer Martinez closed the door behind them and sat down behind the desk. He spread Camilla's documents in front of him like he was solving a puzzle. "Sit down," he commanded, pointing to the chair across from him. Camilla sat carefully, placing her purse on her lap and keeping her hands folded. She had never been in trouble with the law before. The closest she had ever come to dealing with police was when they came to the bakery to buy morning coffee and donuts. The guard began asking her questions in rapid succession. "Where are you going? How long will you stay? Who are you visiting? How much money do you have? Where do you work? Why are you traveling now?" Each question felt like an attack. Camilla answered honestly, explaining about her sister Maria, the bakery job, and her years of saving money for this trip. Officer Martinez listened but didn't seem convinced. He had heard similar stories before from people who were lying. In his mind, honest travelers usually had more money, better clothes, and newer luggage. Camilla's appearance and circumstances made him suspicious. He believed she might be trying to leave the country to escape some kind of trouble. "I'm going to need to search your luggage thoroughly," he announced, standing up from his chair. Camilla nodded nervously, though her heart was racing. She knew she had nothing illegal in her suitcase, but the guard's attitude made her feel like a criminal. He lifted her suitcase onto the desk and opened it slowly. Inside were her neatly folded clothes, all clean and carefully arranged. There were 3 simple dresses, some underwear, a nightgown, and a warm sweater in case the Spanish weather was cool. Everything was modest and well-worn but clean. The guard went through each item methodically. He checked the pockets of every piece of clothing, felt along the seams, and examined the lining of the suitcase. He found the photo album and flipped through it page by page, studying each picture carefully. The photos showed Camilla and Maria as children, playing in their backyard, celebrating birthdays, and standing with their parents. "These could be anyone's photos," Officer Martinez said dismissively. Though the resemblance between the sisters was clear, he continued searching, growing more frustrated when he didn't find anything suspicious. His instincts told him something was wrong, but the evidence didn't support his feelings. Next, he found the gifts Camilla had brought for her nephews, 2 small toy cars and some candy from their home country. He examined these items as if they might contain hidden secrets. The toys were simple and inexpensive, the kind sold at any local store. The candy was in unopened packages with familiar brands. Camilla watched helplessly as the guard dismantled her carefully packed suitcase. Each item she had chosen with care was now scattered across the desk. The guard's rough handling made her feel violated and small. She wanted to cry but forced herself to stay calm. "Where did you get the money for this trip?" Officer Martinez asked suddenly, looking up from her belongings. This question cut deep because Camilla was proud of how hard she had worked to save for this vacation. She explained about her job at the bakery, how she worked extra hours, skipped meals sometimes, and saved every coin she could. The guard remained skeptical. In his experience, people who worked at bakeries couldn't afford international travel. He began to suspect that Camilla might be involved in something illegal, perhaps drug trafficking or human smuggling. These suspicions weren't based on evidence but on his prejudices about poor people and international travel. As the minutes ticked by, Camilla became more worried about missing her flight. She checked her watch and realized that boarding would begin in less than an hour. Her palms were sweaty and she felt sick to her stomach. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but it was turning into a nightmare. "Please, sir," Camilla said softly. "My flight leaves soon. I have all the right papers. I'm just going to visit my sister." Her voice cracked slightly as she spoke. The guard looked at her with cold eyes, unmoved by her distress. Officer Martinez had made up his mind. He believed this young woman was hiding something, and he wasn't going to let her leave until he discovered what it was. His years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, even when the evidence didn't support them. He convinced himself that he was protecting his country from a potential threat. "I'm confiscating your luggage for further investigation," he announced, closing the suitcase and moving it to his side of the desk. Camilla's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. Without her luggage, she couldn't travel. All her clothes, her gifts, her precious photos, everything was in that suitcase. "You can't do that." Camilla protested, her voice rising for the first time. "I haven't done anything wrong. I need my things." The guard's expression hardened at her outburst. He interpreted her emotional response as proof that she was guilty of something. "I can and I will," Officer Martinez replied firmly. "This luggage will be held pending investigation. If you're innocent as you claim, you'll get it back eventually." The word "eventually" hung in the air like a threat. Camilla realized that this man had complete power over her situation. Tears began to flow down Camilla's cheeks. She thought about Maria waiting for her at the airport in Spain, about the money she would lose on the flight ticket, about Mrs. Rodriguez at the bakery who had reluctantly given her time off. All her dreams of seeing her sister were crumbling before her eyes. The guard watched her cry without sympathy. In his mind, her tears were just another manipulation tactic. He had seen many people cry when they were caught trying to break the law. He pulled out some official forms and began filling them out, documenting the seizure of her luggage. "What investigation?" Camilla asked desperately. "Investigating what?" "I work at a bakery. I save money. I want to see my sister. What's wrong with that?" Her questions tumbled out between sobs, but Officer Martinez ignored them. He was busy writing his report, describing his suspicions about this suspicious traveler. Meanwhile, other passengers continued to pass through security without any problems. Businessmen with expensive suits and leather briefcases, tourists with designer luggage, families with matching travel sets. All of them moved through the checkpoint quickly and easily. Camilla couldn't understand why she was being treated differently. The announcement for her flight boarding echoed through the terminal. Camilla heard her flight number being called and felt her heart breaking. She looked at the guard desperately, hoping he might show some mercy, but his face remained stone-cold and determined. "My flight is boarding," she whispered. "Please, I'm begging you, let me go. I'll miss it." The guard glanced up from his paperwork with indifference. He had already decided that she wasn't going anywhere today. "That's not my problem," Officer Martinez said coldly. "You should have thought about that before trying to leave the country under suspicious circumstances." His words were like daggers to Camilla's heart. She couldn't believe that wanting to visit family could be considered suspicious. Camilla's mind raced as she tried to think of something, anything, that might convince him to let her go. She thought about calling her sister, but what could Maria do from Spain? She thought about calling Mrs. Rodriguez, but the bakery owner barely spoke English and wouldn't understand the situation. The guard finished his paperwork and looked up at Camilla with satisfaction. He felt proud of himself for potentially stopping a criminal from leaving the country. In his mind, he was a hero protecting national security, even though he had no evidence of any crime. "You're free to leave the airport," Officer Martinez said, "but your luggage stays here. Any attempt to interfere with this investigation will result in your arrest." The finality in his voice made it clear that there would be no negotiation, no appeal, no mercy. Camilla sat in the plastic chair, staring at her empty hands. Without her luggage, without her clothes, without her gifts for the children, what was the point of traveling? Even if she could somehow still make the flight, she would arrive in Spain with nothing. The thought of facing Maria empty-handed filled her with shame. The final boarding call for her flight echoed through the terminal. Camilla closed her eyes and listened to the announcement, knowing that her seat would soon be given to someone else. All those months of planning, saving, and dreaming were disappearing in an instant. She felt completely powerless against the system that had trapped her. Officer Martinez sealed her suitcase with official tape and attached a large tag with case numbers and stamps. He treated her belongings like evidence in a criminal investigation, even though no crime had been committed. The sight of her suitcase being processed as confiscated goods made Camilla feel like she was watching her own life being packaged away. "How long will the investigation take?" Camilla asked quietly, wiping tears from her eyes. The guard shrugged his shoulders, showing no concern for her situation. He had other travelers to process and didn't want to waste more time on this case. "Could be days, could be weeks, could be months," he replied casually. "Depends on what we find." His vague answer was designed to discourage her from asking more questions. In reality, he had no specific timeline because there was no real investigation planned. Camilla's phone buzzed in her purse. It was a text message from Maria asking if she was excited about the flight. Her sister had taken time off work to pick her up from the Spanish airport and had planned special activities for their reunion. The message made Camilla cry harder, knowing she would have to break her sister's heart with terrible news. The guard watched her read the message with suspicion. In his paranoid mindset, even her emotional reaction to a text was evidence of criminal activity. He made notes about her suspicious communication on his report, adding another layer to his fictional case against her. "I need to make a phone call," Camilla said, standing up slowly. Her legs felt weak and she had to steady herself against the chair. The emotional stress was taking a physical toll on her body. Officer Martinez nodded dismissively, not caring whether she called or not. Camilla walked to a quiet corner of the airport and dialed Maria's number with shaking fingers. The phone rang several times before her sister's cheerful voice answered. Maria was excited and talking rapidly in Spanish about the preparations she had made for Camilla's visit. "Maria, I have bad news," Camilla interrupted, her voice breaking. She explained what had happened, how the guard had taken her luggage, how she had missed her flight. Maria listened in shocked silence, unable to understand how such a thing could happen to her innocent sister. "But you have all the right papers," Maria said in confusion. "You did everything legally. How can they stop you?" Camilla had no answer because she didn't understand it herself. The injustice of the situation was beyond her comprehension. Maria became angry on her sister's behalf. She demanded to know the guard's name, the airport supervisor's contact information, and the procedures for filing complaints. Her protective instincts kicked in as she tried to think of ways to help from thousands of miles away. "Don't worry, sister," Maria said firmly. "I'm going to call the embassy. I'm going to call lawyers. This is not legal what they're doing to you." Her determination gave Camilla a small spark of hope, though she still felt overwhelmed by the situation. Meanwhile, Officer Martinez completed his shift and prepared to go home to his family. He felt satisfied with his day's work, convinced that he had prevented a potential criminal from leaving the country. He locked Camilla's suitcase in a storage room with dozens of other confiscated items, many of which belonged to innocent people who had been wrongly accused. The storage room was cold and dimly lit, filled with forgotten luggage that represented broken dreams and ruined plans. Some suitcases had been there for years, their owners having given up hope of ever getting them back. The bureaucratic system was designed to discourage people from fighting for their belongings. Camilla returned to the security office, hoping to speak with a supervisor or someone with more authority than Officer Martinez. She found a different guard on duty, a woman who listened to her story with more sympathy but explained that she couldn't overturn another officer's decision without proper procedures. "You'll need to file a formal complaint," the female guard explained. "It will be reviewed by the airport security department, then possibly sent to immigration authorities. The process usually takes several weeks." The complex bureaucracy felt like another wall blocking Camilla's path to justice. As evening approached, Camilla realized she had to leave the airport. Her flight was long gone, her luggage was locked away, and there was nothing more she could do that day. She walked through the terminal one last time, watching happy families reunite and excited travelers begin their journeys. The taxi ride home was the longest journey of Camilla's life. She stared out the window at the familiar streets of her neighborhood, but everything looked different now. The excitement and hope she had felt that morning were replaced by deep sadness and confusion. She couldn't understand how her dream vacation had turned into such a nightmare. When she arrived at her small apartment, everything reminded her of the trip she should have been taking. Her passport still lay on the kitchen table where she had placed it the night before. The Spanish phrase book she had been studying was open to a page about ordering food in restaurants. Even her plants seemed to mock her. She had arranged for a neighbor to water them while she was away. Camilla collapsed onto her sofa and called in sick to work. Mrs. Rodriguez was angry because the bakery was short-staffed, but Camilla couldn't face explaining what had happened. She spent the evening crying and trying to understand what had gone wrong. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Officer Martinez's cold stare and her sealed suitcase being carried away. The next morning, Camilla forced herself to begin the complaint process. She took a bus back to the airport and waited in line at the administration office for 3 hours. When she finally spoke to a clerk, she was given a stack of forms to fill out. The paperwork was confusing and asked for information she didn't have. The clerk, a tired-looking woman with glasses, explained that Camilla would need to provide evidence to support her complaint. "Evidence of what?" Camilla asked. "Evidence that I'm innocent? Evidence that I just want to visit my sister?" The clerk shrugged sympathetically but said those were the rules. Days passed and Camilla tried to return to her normal routine at the bakery, but nothing felt normal anymore. Her co-workers asked about her trip, and she had to explain over and over again what had happened. Some people were sympathetic while Others seemed to think she must have done something wrong to deserve such treatment. Mrs. Rodriguez was particularly unsympathetic. "Maybe it's for the best," she said while kneading dough. "Travel is expensive anyway. You should focus on saving money instead of wasting it on flights." Her words stung because Camilla had sacrificed so much to save for this trip. Meanwhile, Maria was fighting from Spain. She contacted the embassy, spoke to lawyers, and even tried to reach airport authorities directly. But every official she spoke to gave her the same response. They couldn't discuss the case due to security regulations. It felt like a conspiracy of silence designed to protect the system rather than the victims. Camilla's savings account, which had once represented freedom and adventure, now felt like a monument to her failure. She had enough money for the trip, but no way to take it. The irony was painful. She had everything she needed except permission from one suspicious guard. 2 weeks after the incident, Camilla received a letter from airport security. Her heart raced as she opened it, hoping for good news. Instead, it was a formal notice that her case was being reviewed by appropriate authorities, and that she would be contacted in due course. The vague language told her nothing useful. The letter included a case number and instructions for following up on her complaint. When Camilla called the number provided, she reached an automated system that transferred her between different departments. After an hour of waiting on hold, she spoke to someone who knew nothing about her case and asked her to call a different number. Camilla's emotional state began to affect her work at the bakery. She made mistakes with orders, burned bread, and struggled to concentrate on simple tasks. The joy she once found in baking fresh bread for her community was gone, replaced by a constant anxiety about her uncertain situation. Her apartment felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in on her as she waited for news that never came. She stopped making plans, stopped dreaming about the future, and stopped believing that justice would ever be served. The vibrant young woman who had walked into the airport full of hope was slowly disappearing. Maria called every day, trying to keep Camilla's spirits up and sharing updates about her own efforts to help. She had contacted journalists, human rights organizations, and political representatives. Some showed interest in the story, but most were too busy with other cases to take action. One evening, Camilla sat at her kitchen table and wrote a letter to Officer Martinez. She poured her heart out, explaining how much the trip meant to her, describing her years of hard work and sacrifice, and begging him to reconsider his decision. She never sent the letter, knowing it would be pointless, but writing it helped her process some of her emotions. The hardest part was losing faith in the system she had always trusted. Camilla had grown up believing that if you followed the rules and worked hard, you would be treated fairly. Officer Martinez had shattered that belief in a single afternoon, showing her that power could be used arbitrarily against innocent people. As the weeks turned into months, Camilla realized that her fight was about more than just getting her luggage back or taking a vacation. It had become a battle for dignity, for justice, and for the right to be treated as a human being rather than a criminal suspect. 3 months had passed since the airport incident, and Camilla was slowly learning to live with her new reality. She had been forced to buy new clothes to replace those trapped in her confiscated suitcase. Every purchase reminded her of the injustice she had suffered. But she couldn't go to work in the same outfit every day. The complaint process had become a maze of bureaucracy that seemed designed to exhaust her patience. Each time she thought she was making progress, she would be told that her case had been transferred to a different department. New forms needed to be filled out, new procedures had to be followed, and new delays were introduced. Camilla's story began to spread beyond her immediate circle when Maria shared it on social media. The post was written in both Spanish and English, describing how an innocent woman had been prevented from visiting her sister by an overzealous airport guard. The story resonated with people who had experienced similar injustices. Slowly, the post began to get attention. People shared their own stories of being mistreated by airport security, immigration officials, and other authorities. A pattern emerged of working-class people being targeted for additional scrutiny simply because of their appearance or economic status. Camilla realized she wasn't alone in her experience. A local journalist named Carlos Mendez reached out to Camilla after seeing the social media posts. He was investigating stories about airport security overreach and was interested in her case. At first, Camilla was hesitant to speak publicly about her experience. She worried about making her situation worse or drawing unwanted attention. Carlos was patient and understanding. He explained that publicity might be her best chance of getting justice. The bureaucratic system was designed to handle complaints quietly and slowly, but public pressure could force officials to act more quickly. After much consideration, Camilla agreed to tell her story. The newspaper article appeared on a Sunday morning with the headline, "Innocent Baker Denied Travel by Suspicious Guard." Carlos had done his research, interviewing legal experts who confirmed that Officer Martinez had exceeded his authority. The article included quotes from immigration lawyers explaining that suspicion alone was not grounds for confiscating someone's luggage. The response to the article was immediate and overwhelming. Camilla's phone rang constantly with calls from other journalists, radio stations, and television producers. She was not prepared for the attention and felt overwhelmed by the sudden interest in her story. Some of the responses were positive and supportive. People sent messages of encouragement, offered legal assistance, and shared similar experiences. A local lawyer named Patricia Gonzalez offered to represent Camilla for free, saying that her case represented an important civil rights issue. However, not all the attention was positive. Some people accused Camilla of seeking publicity or making up her story for attention. Online comments suggested that she must have been hiding something or that the guard was just doing his job. These negative responses hurt almost as much as the original injustice. Officer Martinez also faced scrutiny after the article was published. Airport administrators who had previously ignored Camilla's complaints were suddenly very interested in reviewing her case. The guard was questioned about his actions and asked to provide detailed reports about his decision to confiscate her luggage. Under pressure, Officer Martinez began to realize that his actions might not have been justified. He had acted on suspicion and prejudice rather than evidence, and now his superiors were demanding explanations he couldn't provide. His confident certainty about Camilla's guilt began to waver as he faced professional consequences. The airport released a statement saying they were reviewing the incident and would take appropriate action if any policies were violated. The formal language was designed to avoid admitting fault while appearing responsive to public concern. Camilla's lawyer warned her that institutions often made promises they didn't intend to keep. Meanwhile, Camilla's daily life remained difficult. The stress of the ongoing situation affected her health, her work, and her relationships. She had trouble sleeping and lost weight from worry and anxiety. The confident young woman who had once dreamed of traveling the world had been replaced by someone who was afraid to make any plans for the future. Maria continued to support her sister from Spain, but the distance made everything more difficult. She wanted to fly to her sister's country to help fight the case in person, but she had her own family responsibilities and couldn't afford to take extended time off work. The legal process moved slowly despite the public attention. Camilla's lawyer explained that government agencies were particularly resistant to admitting mistakes because it could lead to lawsuits and policy changes. Every step forward seemed to be followed by new obstacles and delays. As winter approached, Camilla began to lose hope that she would ever get justice. The initial surge of public interest had faded, and new stories had captured the media's attention. She felt forgotten once again, trapped in a system that seemed designed to wear her down until she gave up. 6 months after the airport incident, Camilla received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. The caller identified himself as Director Rodriguez, the head of airport security. His tone was formal but apologetic as he asked if she could come to the airport for a meeting about her case. Camilla's heart raced as she listened to his words. After months of being transferred between different departments and receiving vague responses, someone with real authority was finally taking her seriously. She agreed to the meeting but insisted that her lawyer, Patricia, accompany her. The meeting took place in a large conference room at the airport administration building. Director Rodriguez was there along with several other officials, including a representative from the airport's legal department. The atmosphere was tense but more respectful than any previous interaction Camilla had experienced with airport authorities. Director Rodriguez began by acknowledging that their investigation had found irregularities in how Camilla's case was handled. He was careful not to admit direct fault. but his words implied that Officer Martinez had acted improperly. The months of public pressure and legal scrutiny had finally forced the airport to take action. We have concluded that the confiscation of your luggage was not supported by sufficient evidence, the director said carefully. While security procedures require vigilance, they also require justification for extraordinary measures. His formal language was a bureaucratic way of admitting that Camilla had been wronged. Officer Martinez was not present at the meeting, but Director Rodriguez explained that the guard had been reassigned to duties that better suit his experience and training. This was another diplomatic way of saying he had been demoted or transferred away from passenger screening duties. The most important news came next. Camilla's suitcase would be returned to her immediately, along with a formal apology from the airport authority. Additionally, they offered to compensate her for the missed flight and provide a voucher for future travel. The monetary amount wasn't huge, but it represented official acknowledgement of the harm she had suffered. Camilla felt overwhelmed with emotion as she listened to the director's words. After months of fighting for basic recognition that she had been treated unfairly, she was finally receiving justice. Tears flowed down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief rather than despair. Patricia, her lawyer, negotiated additional terms to ensure that Camilla's rights were fully protected. The settlement included a written guarantee that there would be no retaliation for her complaints, and that her name would be removed from any security watch lists. These protections were important to ensure she could travel freely in the future. When they brought out her suitcase, Camilla almost couldn't believe it was real. The official tape and tags were removed, and she was invited to inspect the contents to ensure everything was still there. Her clothes were wrinkled from months in storage, but her precious photo albums and gifts for her nephews were intact. The airport also implemented policy changes as a result of Camilla's case. New training programs were established to help security officers understand when suspicion justified action and when it was simply prejudice. Supervisory review procedures were strengthened to prevent similar incidents in the future. Carlos Mendez, the journalist who had first written about Camilla's story, was invited to cover the resolution. His follow-up article highlighted how public attention and legal pressure could sometimes force institutions to do the right thing. The story inspired other people facing similar injustices to speak up and seek help. Camilla's victory was bittersweet. While she had finally received justice, the months of struggle had taken their toll. She was no longer the same optimistic young woman who had first planned to visit her sister. The experience had taught her that the world could be unfair, and that fighting for justice required tremendous strength and persistence. With her suitcase returned and travel voucher in hand, Camilla finally had the opportunity to visit Maria in Spain. The sisters' reunion was emotional and healing. Maria had prepared a celebration not just for Camilla's visit, but for her victory against injustice. During her stay in Spain, Camilla slowly began to heal from the trauma of her experience. The Spanish countryside was as beautiful as Maria had described, and spending time with her nephews helped restore some of her faith in simple joys. She realized that while the fight for justice had been necessary, she couldn't let it define the rest of her life. When Camilla returned home, she found that her story had inspired positive changes beyond her own case. Other airports had reviewed their security procedures, and several people who had faced similar injustices had successfully resolved their own cases by following her example. Camilla returned to work at the bakery with a new perspective on life. She still enjoyed baking fresh bread for her community, but she also understood the importance of standing up for what was right. Her experience had transformed her from someone who quietly accepted unfairness into someone who would fight for justice, both for herself and for others. The suitcase that had once been confiscated now sat in her bedroom closet, ready for her next adventure. But this time, Camilla traveled with confidence, knowing that she had the strength to overcome obstacles and the support of people who believed in justice. Her story had become proof that ordinary people could fight powerful institutions and win, even when the odds seemed impossible.